listening to the GM Shuffle with Michael Lombardi, presented by DraftKings and VSiN.
Okay, it's the GM Shuffle. My guy, Michael Lombardi. I'm Patrick Meagher as we welcome you in. Of course, Week 8 NFL big guy kicking off tonight here in Los Angeles. You're going to see a lot of purple in the crowd, no doubt. You've got the 5-1 Vikings taking on the 2-4 Rams. We'll get to the 2-4 Rams because they could be sellers coming up. Just quickly on the number, if you want to take it with the Rams, you can find a 3 in the market. If you want to lay it with the Vikings, you can find a 2.5. The key number of 348 on the total. Michael, welcome. How are you?
I'm great. And, this is an interesting year in the betting world because all these road favorites have been cashing. Last week, the Chargers should have cashed. They had a couple bad calls go against them. But I think they were like 16-2 going into this weekend, or 16-3 going into Monday night. It ended up being 17-3 Monday after the Monday night game. So, yeah, I think there's such a separation of these teams, the good to the bad, that these road favorites are cashing when usually we would always want to play the road dog, and I think this is the case. I'm surprised the line's moving towards the Rams. I know short week, you always want to play it. How happy is Al Michaels tonight, right? I mean, we're going to probably, if we don't get the greatest tie tonight, we're never getting one. He's got a home game. He can drive from Brentwood. After the game, he'll have his table at Toscano's, which is still one of my favorite restaurants of all time. And, I mean, it'll be unbelievable. I mean, this is like Al will be so happy. He could give a shit about the game. He's just happier than hell to be in L.A. and knowing he's going to Toscano's after the game. That night's going to be perfect tonight.
Well, he can get a round of golf in, too, before
the
game.
Absolutely.
Hit the game, just, quick 3 hours and go to Toscano's and have a cocktail.
There you go. It'd be perfect. Not have any vegetables. Life is good for Al when you're playing these home games. I mean, he's not down in Jacksonville. Could you imagine how miserable he'd be if he was in Jacksonville? Oh, it's so good. But look, I think it's an interesting game because I think Minnesota has to get back on track, right? They let one slip away. They had it. And it's a hard game for the Rams because this Minnesota defense is so good at stopping the run. Now, we might see Hawkinson activated tonight. We may see Puka Nacua activated for the Rams. We're going to see KUPP activated. So it has a lot of good positivity going into the game. But I think Minnesota needs to get back on track. They really have to kind of get over that loss of Detroit, letting Detroit come in there and beat them. And they've got to be able to hold on to the lead. Look, they were up by 28-0 against Green Bay. Green Bay came back. They still won at 31-29. They were up 17-0 against the Jets over in London. The Jets made a comeback, but they won at 23-17. Then last week, they're up 10-0 and actually get the lead, and Detroit comes back.
Yeah, I think, and we talked about it last week, I took away from the Vikings, they're legit. And This is a big game for O'Connell. Maybe you would agree because quickly turn around after taking on the Lions in division and on a Thursday night. Look, the pass defense is great. They're going to blitz Stafford like crazy. And the other part of it coming out of this is now at 2-4, Michael, the Rams look like they could be sellers. We've got the trade deadline coming up on November 5th. Cooper KUPP is on the market now. He's going to play tonight. It's probably going to be on a pitch count. I think you would agree. But he's going to play, and all of a sudden, the Rams are taking offers for Cooper KUPP.
Well, they have to. I mean, he's the second highest paid player on their team, right? And, where are they going with KUPP? I think the Rams have come to and I'm not saying they're going to tank, but I think the Rams are looking at their future and saying, where are we going? Now, they had KUPP earlier in the year. He had 27 targets. He averaged 8.2 yards a catch. That's pedestrian-like. That's not good enough, right? And look, Puka averaged 8.8 yards a catch in the 4 targets that he had. So I think a lot of the Rams' problems, Patrick, come down to their offensive line. And this isn't a kind of game you want to go into with a bad offensive line. Now, one thing about Minnesota, this is remarkable about Minnesota. They've allowed 62 of their 107 points all in the second half. What does that tell us? That tells us that once you get a read on what they're doing, you can then start throwing the ball, right? They've only allowed 3 points in the first quarter all year. They have a 96-45 edge at halftime, which is they played from in front in every game. And McConnell knows enough about McVay that he knows he's got to stop the run. He knows he's got to stop the run, make them play make this an all-pass game. But if I'm the Rams, if I'm Kevin Demoff, I'm Les Snead, I'm thinking to myself, you know what? We're probably not going anywhere with Stafford. Look, they redid his contract, but they really didn't do his contract. They gave him a little bit more cash, not a lot, right? But we're going to need a quarterback. We're old at receiver with KUPP. He can't stay healthy. Maybe it's time we do rip the Band-Aid off and start over. They're 13th in the NFC right now. If they lose tonight, are they really a playoff team, Patrick?
Oh, no. And I agree. And I want to ask you about Stafford here coming up in just a bit. He did get the Super Bowl, but KUPP, the rumors are a second rounder. With those injuries, nobody's going to take on that contract for a second rounder. My assumption, Michael, is maybe a conditional third or conditional fourth. What are you hearing about KUPP, the value, potential landing spots, and what they could get back for him?
Well, I think to me, the key to get back something for him is the Rams have indicated they're willing to pay the price, right? They're willing to pay salary, which is critical, right? And there's huge acceleration on this contract too. So I think to me, you got to believe Pittsburgh's interested. Tampa losing Godwin, would he be the perfect kind of reset for Godwin? Yeah, but I think you got to really make the decision. You know, is he still the good? I mean, we hear Cooper KUPP, right? We hear, we think 21. We think back then when he was the MVP of the Super Bowl. Are we sure he's that good again? I don't know. A lot of injuries, you know. This is a kid who's a third-round pick who's really done a great job of increasing his talent, increasing his speed, increasing his explosiveness through just hard work, really, through hard work. And you owe him that. You love seeing it. But, I mean, this might be the point where what's that worth to you, right? Like, what would you give up? What would Pittsburgh want to give up? You want to give up a third-round pick? Well, he said, well, the Jets just gave up a third. Well, you don't have to be as stupid as the Jets for Devontae Adams, right? That's not the market, right? You don't have to do that. I can't imagine there's a lot of high picks going on this. I think to me, you have to be concerned about durability, right?
And then how about Matthew Stafford? He's 36. He'll be 37 in February. He's still playing at a level other teams would covet, right? It's just the Rams, they can't build this team moving forward on sentiment, and they have to make a decision. If somebody gets thirsty for a quarterback, I'm guessing they'd start to listen.
Yeah, but who's that, right? Like, would the Giants be a player here? I mean, it's a short-term fix. You know, it struck me, and I don't want to make anything over this, but when he was on the NFL on Fox, it kind of told me maybe he's tried that. I mean, I think that you've been rooting for Stafford. You've known him. I don't think the guy is tougher. I mean, there's no one tougher than him, right? Nope. I mean, he's so freaking tough, right? But I think at some point, when do you say that enough's enough? Does he retire? You know, and I think the Rams are tired. They have to be tired of being, you know, where they've got to find their future. I thought in the draft last year, I thought that they would make a move for a quarterback. There was some talk, not a lot, that they potentially could go after Michael Penix if he slid a little bit, but that was more Brock Bowers conversation. But Stafford's got, you know, his base salary this year is $23 million. They didn't lower that base salary to increase his cap, but he's got huge cap acceleration on him for the next 2 years. He only has $4 million in guaranteed money next year. I mean, they guaranteed the 24-year at 23.5. They guaranteed all of it. And so his cap number's 46. Next year it goes 49. The year after it's 59. And then, you know, he's done. So, but at 36, who's taking him on? Like, what team? That's a small market, right? Like, I think he's a good player, but with Seattle, they're not trading him to Seattle, but what team would take on a 36-year-old quarterback and think he got a future?
And his family loves it in LA. He's got a bunch of kids. I think if the Rams were thinking about moving him, I think he'd go into broadcast. I totally agree with you. And I as you were talking about it, there isn't a market right now. I mean, Tua's back. We'll get to him coming up in just a bit. So Miami's not going to be in the mix. I think the KUPP to the Bucs, that is fascinating what's happened with the Bucs right now, because Atlanta's favored in division. The Bucs are a better football team. They just lost everything. I mean, Evans, that hamstring's going to bark. The ankle was terrible for Godwin. He's done for the year. I mean, that literally watched the season go away.
Yeah, and they're so embarrassed by how they played defensively against Baltimore. I mean, Todd Bowles has probably had just a horrible week. You know, that's not who he is as a defense. And look, Baltimore's a tough offense to handle because they make you go sideways and then they can go vertical. They make you defend the width and the length of the field in their run game. So to me, but I think they'll play better against Atlanta this week. I really do, because they got embarrassed. But you're right. I mean, Godwin and Evans are not going to play in this game, and that is the key to Tampa's offense. And they could feel the South slip. I don't think Atlanta's a good team either, but who is a good team in the South?
No, 100%. No, I know you talked about this, but I want to get it on the shuffle here. The Chiefs are acquiring wide receiver DeAndre Hopkins. So D-Hop, a conditional 5th rounder to the Titans. Look, they needed to make a move. That team's been carried the Chiefs by the defense. The injuries have been ridiculous. So D-Hop comes in. He's 31, 32 years old. The impact.
Well, I think to me, this trade tells you a lot about who the Chiefs think they are, right? Like, the Chiefs are no longer trying to convince us they're an explosive offense, right? The Chiefs are going to say, we're going to take Hopkins. We know he can't separate from anybody. We know he's always covered. But what we're going to get out of Hopkins is some third down conversions. We're going to keep the ball. We're taking some pressure off our defense. Look, we're not looking to score 30 in any game going forward. We're looking to be able to help our defense stay on the field, stay off the field, and not have to deal with third down. I think that's kind of the way you look at it, because there's really on the surface, from a surface evaluation, you say to yourself, well, they just got slower. I mean, Kelsey's not running anywhere near he could. They don't have any speed on the outside. They lose Rice. They lose all these receivers. So I think, to me, you could say, well, they're really gotten slower. Okay, they have, but I'm not sure they mind being a little slower because they want to control the ball. One thing Andy Reid has done a wonderful job of is figuring out who he is, right? So now he's got Hopkins, Smith-Schuster, and Worthy, who's kind of just their fast guy. I mean, you can't get slower than Hopkins and Smith-Schuster, right? And Kelsey, you add him into the mix. Noah Gray's their best, really. He makes more plays than anybody. They have weaknesses at offensive tackle. That's true, right? They've been getting by with a left tackle that's not very good. I think this trade reinforces we're going to run the football. We need Pacheco back.
All right, when we come back, GM Shuffle, it looks like, I can't wait to hear Michael's take on this, John Mara has made a decision about the GM and the coach there with the Giants. Also, we have quarterback decisions being made all across the league, including in Carolina, including in Cleveland. We'll get to those next right here on the GM Shuffle. Michael Lombardi, I'm Patrick Meagher.
You're listening to the GM Shuffle with Michael Lombardi, presented by DraftKings and VSiN.
The GM Shuffle, welcome back. Michael Lombardi, I'm Patrick Meagher. NFL News and Notes presented by Smirnoff, the world's #1 vodka. Please drink responsibly. Week 8 NFL kicks off tonight, Los Angeles. The Rams hosting the Vikings. Again, if you want to take it with the Rams, you can take the 3. If you want to lay it with the Vikings, you can, lay the 2.5. Okay, just quickly wanted to finish up on the Chiefs with D-Hop. They're laying 10 at the Raiders. Again, Michael, the last time we saw the Chiefs lose a football game was against the Raiders. You look at this number on the road laying doubles. This says more about the Raiders and where they are right now.
Yeah, well, I mean, the Raiders are a mess. I mean, I don't see where this is going. Now we Gardner Minshew is going to be the full-time starter because Aiden O'Connell broke his thumb and he's out. So they had to bring in Desmond Ridder off the practice squad, right? And he comes in to be the backup quarterback. I think the bigger issue with the Raiders is they have no offensive line. I mean, they can't really run blocks. Zaire White can't get going. Yeah, I mean, look, the Raiders are going to play this one hard. There's no question. They get up for the Chiefs. But don't you remember this offseason when Pierce was talking about how they have the Chiefs number? They have Mahomes rules where they said, when the Pistons played, the Pistons used to have Michael Jordan rules. Well, I mean, you get a little carried away, aren't you, there on that? Like, why would you rattle the cage of Patrick Mahomes? Seriously. I don't know if I want to do that. They get Hopkins to go in there to help their offense. They can still run the football. I thought the Rams, were able to move the ball in the Raider defense last week. I just don't get some of the things the Raiders do. They are so far removed from being what the representation of the Raiders should be, which is tough, physical, big, size, speed. I just don't see it. And Gardner Minshew at quarterback, I don't see that either.
Hey, maybe you could get Antonio Pierce on the Daily Coach if it doesn't work out, because during the offseason, remember he wrote like War and Peace in the Players Tribune about how excited he was to be the Raiders head coach before he even coached a game officially. Like, it is just they do everything ass backwards.
I mean, and he got the job. Devontae Adams lobbied for him to get the job with Mark Davis, and so did Max Crosby. Look, at every decision he makes on the field is horrendous. I mean, like, tell me one he makes that's good, and so and their defense this year, Patrick, has not played anywhere near where they played last year. I think that's the part that you've got to really take a look at and say, okay, last year they were better on defense. There's no question they were better on defense last year, but so far this year, they have not been the same defense that, we saw them in the way they were in terms of that. So, they're 26th in yards per attempt rushing. They're 23rd. They're 13th in passing. I mean, that you could run the football on this team. And the worst thing you want to be, to me, is a football team. And I know we all get caught up and you got to throw the ball. You do. You have to. I'm definitely there. But the one place you don't want to be where your team's vulnerable every single week is when you can't run it and you can't stop the run. Okay? When you can't run it, they can't. The Raiders are 30th in rushing yards per attempt. They're 30th in yards. They can't stop the run. They're 26th in yards per attempt allowed. They're 23rd. They force no turnovers. They're 30th in the league in forcing turnovers. They're 32nd in the league in giving the ball away. That screams that it's not a well-coached team to me. They don't protect the ball. They give it away. They can't run the ball. If you're a head coach in the NFL, the one thing you want to do, Kevin O'Connell, I'm going to stop the run, and I got to run the ball. That's kind of how you have to build the program. Look, I want to make explosive plays too, but the Raiders are 32nd in the league in throwing interceptions. You're not managing the game when you're doing that. Like, it just screams that this guy is in over his head, and he's not going to walk into the office of Luke Getsy and say, here's what I want, or go over to Patrick Graham and say, here's what I want. I mean, you basically have a guy that the players anointed because they love them. When has that ever worked out?
So the Chiefs laying doubles at the Raiders. We talked about D-Hop to the Chiefs. The Titans are at the Lions. The Lions are laying 11, so a couple of big prices there. Let's talk about a family and a couple of people as well. Mr. Daboll coaching the Giants, Shane general manager. So John Mara apparently was at an event honoring his father, Wellington Mara, last night, and he said he does not anticipate making changes at coach and general manager. Do you believe him, and is this the right decision?
What answer could he possibly give that's the right answer there, right? If he says what he says, right? I think he couched it. I'm not anticipating what that's the right answer. If he says, I'm going to wait until the end of the year, then he just puts all the pressure on Daboll and Shane. I mean, he can't be happy with Shane. He just can't be. For a couple $1 million, he loses Barkley. He could have signed Barkley back. That's not an issue. And so is this team any better? I mean, Evan Neal is their starter. It doesn't even get on the field, Patrick. They drafted him, 5th pick overall in the draft? They can't even get him on the field. And guess what? I know this is a shocker to you, but they need offensive linemen. And they drafted a guy in the top 10, and they can't get him on the field. You can't be happy with what he's done. I mean, look, they're trying to. They got saddled with Jones. We talked about this when we did shows together. I mean, they fell in love with Jones for all the reasons you can't fall in love with Jones. But I don't think it's Jones is all his fault right now. I think the team's not very good. They're better on defense, I'll grant you that, but in the defensive front. But I don't know if this is all Daboll's fault. More of a design problem by the Giants than it is a production problem. I think they're stuck with it's hard to win with Daniel Jones, and it's hard to win with what they have offensively in the line.
We've got the Giants
say this
like
off
2-5. Got the Steelers coming up on Monday night. There's your boy Tomlin 5-2 with Pittsburgh 6.5.
You don't think coaching's a requirement? And here's the thing. Shane said the offensive line was the mandate in the offseason. We got to do a better job of protecting them. That's what he said. I did, and that's what he said. But you watched that Eagle game. Did they do a better job of protecting them? Of course not. The Eagles were running rampant on them. And so, to me, that's the biggest concern is I don't know. But what is John supposed to say? Look, there's institutional problems within the Giants. It isn't just the coach. It isn't just – they've got to change their method of doing business. That ain't going to happen.
No, that's not going to happen. A change at quarterback for the Panthers. So Andy Dalton, him and his family, car accident. Apparently he sprained his thumb. So Bryce Young to start on Sunday versus the Broncos after the Dalton crash. The Panthers are at the Broncos. The Broncos are up to 10, 41.5 as a total Bryce Young.
How is that possible? How could the Broncos be favored by double digits on anybody? They barely can score points, right? And so, but look, if you go over the injury list for the Panthers, I mean, Clowney's hurt, Jules hurt, Robinson's hurt, Andy Dalton's hurt, Trimble's hurt, Taylor Moton's hurt. I mean, they're hurt everywhere, and they're not a good team. I mean, you talk about a design problem. This happens right here in Carolina. I don't think Dave Canales is ready to be a head coach. I certainly don't think Dan Morgan's ready to be a general manager. But this is the problem. And to me, if I were David Tepper and I knew that all these people I just put in place and I'm still 10 points less than the Denver Broncos, who hired Sean Payton and you didn't want to hire, you could have hired Sean Payton. But you don't want to give up control. So you didn't want to give up control to hire Sean. Here's Sean Payton rebuilding the Broncos, but you didn't want him to rebuild the Panthers. It just screams to me this, and Sean's got it. Sean's probably, he ain't going to hold back on this one either now.
He's going to stick it to him. That's his vibe. He, you know what? You like it too. And the Broncos, the Broncos 9.5-10 hosting the Carolina Panthers. Again, that's more about the Panthers. The Browns, Michael, officially named Jameis Winston QB1 after the popped Achilles with Deshaun Watson. And then another change. So Ken Dorsey's going to take over the play calling duties from Stefanski.
They've been trying to do that all year. I mean, they signed Bailey Zappi from the Kansas City practice squad too, right? And then they're going to promote. So now they got 3 quarterbacks on the team. Look, the best game that I think that Deshaun Watson had this career was that game that they played last year in Baltimore, where Cleveland controlled the clock for 34 minutes. They were able to they ran on the ground for 178 yards. They completed it. He threw the ball really well, even though he was sacked 4 times in the game. But, I think the Browns will play really good defense against this game, but I just don't know how the hell the Browns are going to not turn the ball over with Winston. How many will he give them? I think that's the bigger concern. And look, it's interesting. When Flacco played, they could throw the ball down the field. When Watson came back in, they couldn't throw the ball down the field. When Winston comes in, Jameis comes in and he throws for 6.9 yards per attempt in the little stint that he comes in for. Meanwhile, Watson's still at 5.3. Like everybody else can throw the ball except for the guy that they're counting on. And if you can't throw the ball, the Ravens, they allow 8.1 yards per attempt. They've given up 84 points in the fourth quarter. Think about this. They gave up 84 points in the fourth. They've only given up 96 for the other 3 quarters. I mean, that's just like, how is that possible? You can play good defense for 3 quarters, but 84 in the fourth? To me, if you're the Brownies, you got to have a chance here. I think, to me, look, I don't doubt it.
8.5-9. Yeah, Ravens are laying 8.5-9 on the road at Cleveland.
I mean, it's unbelievable, right? I mean, you got to take that, don't you? You got to take Cleveland here, aren't you? I don't think they win.
I'm not, after that Monday night game, I'm not laying that price on the road, even with the Ravens, who are a wagon right now on offense.
Yeah, I mean, they're hard to stop, but the Ravens, I mean, Jim Schwartz does a good job defensively. They'll play good defense, and maybe Winston will lift the team. Winston does have some, correct. He's a leader. He's charismatic. He's got some real intangibles that go with him, but I think this is going to be a hard game for him. I really do. But if he doesn't protect the ball, where you don't cover this game is if Winston becomes the Winston that we remember in Tampa.
It's weird, the vibe around Cleveland right now. Stefanski's won Coach of the Year twice. The Achilles, he's going to be, that's going to take a while to come back from. But the defense is good. You mentioned Schwartz. Right now, a place that you know very well is a freaking mess.
It is. Well, that's because the owner's got his fingers at everything. I mean, they signed this guy. They're trying to make it but the one thing I will say, they've been trying to get Dorsey to call play. I mean, they didn't want Stefanski calling plays at all. They hired Dorsey to call the plays. He relinquished. They finally got that done because obviously somebody in that building doesn't think Stefanski's a good play caller. They want Stefanski to be the overseer of everything. It's shocking to me. I think the guy's a good play caller.
All right, Smirnoff, of course, #1 vodka. NFL news and notes. When we come back, the game of the weekend, it could be, is Jaden Daniels going to play v. Caleb Williams? We'll get to Commanders, Bears coming up next year. GM Shuffle.
You're listening to the GM Shuffle with Michael Lombardi, presented by DraftKings and VSiN.
The GM Shuffle, Michael Lombardi. I'm Patrick Meagher as we welcome you back. So this was flexed, Michael. You've got the Commanders sitting 5-2, surprise. You've got the Bears sitting 4-2. Of course, number 1 overall pick in Caleb Williams and the number 2 overall pick, and both playing well, Jaden Daniels. Now, Daniels with the rib. He didn't practice yesterday. Now it's Thursday. I haven't heard if he's practiced. It's 50-50 a jump ball right now, whether he's going to go.
Yeah, the book doesn't think he's going. This number's been moving, and so I don't think they're going to go. Mariota came in last week. But look, I think when you break Jaden Daniels down, his ability to throw the deep ball is second to nobody. He's so good on that third level. He like the old Russell Wilson, he just like lays it right in there and it drops down. But where I think he shows up more than ever, and especially with the games, is his movement. So of his runs, 36 of them have been scrambles. So and he's run the ball 66 times. So 54.5% of his running attempts have been off of the quarterback dropping back. Oh, I got to take off and go. 266 yards have come from scrambles. That's 71% of his 372 yards are on scrambles. That's pretty damn impressive, right? So when you take that out of the offense, right? So now you're Matt Eberflus, and you've seen these guys. You got the reel of him running around and watching it. You're like, wait a second. Lamar's only gained 224 yards rushing. He's at 49% of the scramble of his yards based on. Now he's got predetermined runs, but way less than that. And so, to me, I think that's where this game gets a little iffy. Can they do that? Where do they replace those yards? Where do they replace those scramble yards that Daniels has been so goddamn good doing? I think this Washington team is a wonderful story in the sense of how Dan has gone in there and built a culture, kind of reestablished them, and they've won right away. I mean, this quarterback is really good, but this is a little bit different because I think the Bears are better on defense, and I think Caleb's starting to play a little bit better as well.
And by the way, we can look at Dan Quinn's value just by looking at this Cowboys defense this year. And we'll get to them coming up in just a bit, but they've fallen apart without Quinn. Now, for the Bears, I'd like to get a State of the Union on Eberflus and the Bears. They're 4-2. Their 4 wins, Michael: Tennessee, the Rams, Carolina, and Jacksonville. This is a step up where they're laying 2.5, 3 against the Commanders.
Yeah, it is. But, and look, they're going against a defense that isn't great, right? We know that. They're not an elite defense, but they've rallied, they play hard. Washington, they're able to make the critical plays, and they're run by this offense. I think if Daniels doesn't play, it really becomes a factor in the game, a factor on the defensive side of it too. So, for me, I give the Bears credit. I think when you watch Caleb, he's starting to throw, but most of Caleb's throws, Patrick, are 10 yards and under. He's getting better on the deeper balls down the field. But when you study him, now he doesn't run anywhere near, like he is not in the category of rushing. Like he doesn't have the scramble yards that he does. He only has 136 of his 269 yards come from scrambles. Now, what he's good at doing is making loose plays and running around. But it'll be an interesting game. I don't think Washington's going to be intimidated by the Bears offense. I think the one thing the Bears have done a better job is running the football lately in a couple of weeks, which takes the pressure off of Caleb. I still think it'll be a good game, but Daniels has to play. I think we'll know today. Today's Thursday. We're taping this. He's got to play before I would touch the game in any way.
Just quickly on the Bucs, and then we can move on. The Falcons are laying 2.5 on the road at the Bucs, and Godwin had been one of the best wide receivers in football. A terrible injury with a minute to go in a game that was out of reach, broken ankle, probably done for the year. You have Evans with the hamstring out until after the bye. Hey, are you hearing they are going to make a move? We talked a little bit about KUPP earlier, but they have to do something to replace Godwin.
Yeah, I think they definitely do. They need a possession. Well, Godwin's not a possession receiver. They need somebody to go inside and catch the ball. That's why KUPP makes some sense there. But again, it comes down to what are they asking for, right? I think that's what it comes down to. When they played they just played a few weeks ago, right? And Atlanta came back. They scored a touchdown on the first drive of overtime, won the game. And, in the week 5 meeting, it was Atlanta closed 2.5-point favorite at home. For me, I think the one thing Tampa can do now is run the football. And they win that game if they don't fumble late in the game. Remember, they fumbled against them in late in the game, and it really cost them. They had a chance to put the game away. So for me, I think this is going to be one. I think Todd Bowles was embarrassed. I think his defensive front didn't play well. Lamar's going to do that to you sometimes. But I think this is going to be a game where he's got to play better. Mariota, I think ultimately they got to put pressure, just like what we saw last week with Seattle. You start to get Kirk to move around, you got a better chance. They sacked Kirk 4 times in a game last time they played him.
We're finishing up the news and notes here on GM Shuffle. The Saints and running back Alvin Kamara. So the Saints are at the Chargers. Rattler under center again for the Saints. The Chargers, I just saw a shop show 7.5. Most shops are showing the Chargers laying the 7. Kamara agreed on a 2-year, $24.5 million extension that puts him under contract through 2026. You said during the break this was a weird one for you.
Yeah, I was really surprised by this. I was surprised by how, they left his contract alone. They're carrying $100 million of debt next year in the salary cap thing. I was surprised they went in this direction, and I know he's been after a new contract. I thought he was losing it a little bit early in the season. I thought he played well, but to me, I think eventually, how much further can he go? Like, are you sure you want to invest this in a running back? It's an interesting signing because let me ask you this question. Are we sure Dennis Allen's going to be the coach there next year?
No, we're not.
That to me is like, what are we going to do? So I don't know, but they obviously feel like Kamara's still a big part of their offense.
When you have an embarrassment of riches, and that's what the Lions have on offense, when you get the news of Jamison Williams facing a 2-game suspension for PEDs, you're okay. You don't prefer it because that's a big piece of their offense this year. He had a great offseason. Williams potentially out for 2 games. Thoughts?
Well, I think it hurts their vertical. I mean, he's made some really critical plays. They've done a good job of working around it. I mean, he's done a good job of one thing, Goff's thrown the deep ball really well. He missed the throw last week against Minnesota. I do think it does affect him, but they've got a lot. One thing about I think Campbell's done a really good job of handling the locker room, and the players are selfless in there. They kind of all assume the role. So I actually think that they'll be able to overcome this. But I do think he's been playing well enough that it really affects them. I think he gives them a vertical outside receiver that they need. But look, St. Brown's still the guy that's going to get the football. Let's be clear. He's not going to mess around with it. They're going to throw the football to him.
I have a question for you. So you and Bill Belichick and, of course, my guy, Matt Patricia, just finished up the latest edition of the Coaches Pod. I'm curious, Week 8, what was the theme? Because for you, it feels like the theme has been just a plethora of very bad football teams. And that's indicative in lines this week. You're seeing a ton of doubles on the board. Like, what was the theme this week with the Coaches Pod?
I think to me, the theme was that there's a point in the season where if you're not practicing or staying on the details or really working the team, teams can go from being good to bad in a hurry. But you can also improve your team at this time of the year. I think like Detroit, I think one thing about Detroit, that I think they practice hard, they're going to get better. I think that's what you could say about Washington. Even though they're not talented on defense and their strength of their 5 wins is 286 percentage. I mean, it's not very good, but they're getting better in that area, right? And so I think to me, what we were talking about a lot in the roundtable up there was off air, really a lot off air was, if you're not pressing the needle now, if you're really not, because everybody's so worried about the injury bug, everybody's worried about saving themselves for the season, you got to get better fundamentally, and you got to get better technique-wise, and you got to tackle really good. Tackling becomes really important this time of the year. If you don't spend time tackling, if you're just going to go out to a bunch of walkthroughs because your people in the building say, hey, look, that's what offended me so much about Carolina. That's what made me think, oh, my God, Carolina, they're not getting any better. And they're a team that needs to practice. See, here's the conflict you get into. When you have a bad team and you have an older bad team, you can't practice, so you can't get better. When you have a younger team, you can practice and get better. You can make the team better. You're the first-year coach. You're practicing. You're getting better. I think Arizona was that way last year. They could practice and get better. If you're Dallas and you're worried about injuries, are you really practicing enough? There's this fine line of balance. Like Carolina's, we see no improvement in Carolina, right? We see no improvement in the Giants. They really have, they're better on defense, but they're not improved. They're the 15th seed in the NFC East, right? We don't see anything. And same thing with the Rams. I think part of the Rams' insistence on maybe they need to rebuild is because to get better, you got to practice. And when you have an older team, you can't practice.
I do have one team that has gotten worse week to week, and they play up in New England. I'm curious, maybe off air, did the word soft come up? Because if we're being clear,
we talked about
that team in New England last year was not soft. He has to be losing his mind hearing those players called soft.
Oh, he was. I don't think it offended him. But look, here's the reality. They keep saying that they're, we wrote this for the Daily Coach today, and I think it's so true. When Missoula kissed the floor, the parquet floors at the Celtics, to acknowledge the people from the past that have won before, who played on that floor, we wrote about how the Patriots have tried to dismiss everything that's happened to them in the prior years. They want to give Belichick no credit. They want to take all the credit. You can't have a culture when you do that. Like, there shouldn't be. Look, you have every right to move on from Bill Belichick if you wanted to do it. 6 Super Bowls doesn't give you enough time. Okay, people say, well, he had 4 years, he didn't turn this thing around. Well, okay, great. We're talking about the San Antonio Popovich. He's had a lot of time to turn that around. They didn't bail on him yet, right? So I think, to me, the conversation there were, look, this happens all the time, and I predicted this. When you go from somebody who's controlling everything to somebody who wants to loosen up everything, it's going to fall apart. I've watched this. This is where experience comes in, right? I saw this. We fired Marty Schottenheimer. We hired Bud Carson. They're completely different coaches, right? Marty was on top of everything. He was detailed. He practiced. Well, we had some of Marty's team left in us, but as the longer Bud Carson went, the worse we got. And I think that's what's going to happen.
Got Marty in the Hall of Fame yet?
I'm trying, but it hasn't happened yet.
He needs to be in.
He's one of 9 guys who won 200 games. He said one. It's a joke. It's a joke. Do you see the list of people that could get in the Hall of Fame this year?
You can read it. Football Done Right. The top 5 games, week 8 coming up next, GM Shuffle.
You're listening to the GM Shuffle with Michael Lombardi, presented by DraftKings and VSiN.
It's the GM Shuffle. We welcome you back, presented by Smirnoff. We do game days. Please drink responsibly. The Smirnoff Company, New York, New York. We're going to get to the top 5 games of week 8. Michael Lombardi. I'm Patrick Meagher. Also get to our bet highlight presented by DraftKings. Michael Lombardi with a play at the end. Okay, let's start here with the Dallas Cowboys at the 49ers. The Cowboys are 3-3. I'm going to use a word to describe them this year, and you tell me what you think. Stale. It just feels stale right now, almost like they're just getting by. You've heard the comments from Jerry Jones yesterday about Derrick Henry. It just feels stale at 3-3.
Yeah, I think, to me, they're in that trap place. They know they need to improve. They can't. They've got some contracts that they need to get to, and they've got to develop some young players. I think, and I don't think they're as good as people think they were last year. I think it's always hard to measure up, and they've made a couple choices to decide to do that. I think what Jerry's comments were about the running back, that he just kind of, if you're signing Derrick Henry, you got to build a team around him. I get that, but I think, to me, there's a little bit of a design issue down in Dallas that they need to. They're young in the offensive line, which is always a concern going into the season when you do that, and I think, to me, they're just not good enough on defense. They brought Zimmer in, and it's not Mike's fault. They just have no defensive tackles. I think some of the guys are counting on to be there, and let's face it, Dan Quinn took all their depth. He took all their depth with him to Washington. And that really has hurt them. It really has hurt them. They had no money. I think they got caught in this trap, and I think it really hurt them.
It's part of the culture thing. Those players wanted to go with Quinn to Washington, right? So it's part of what the kids say vibes. They wanted to go be a part of the Dan Quinn vibes, regardless of good coach, bad coach. That's what he's building at 5-2 with the Commanders. Conversely, the 49ers are 3-4. Debo with the pneumonia, he could play. Kittle didn't practice yesterday. Jennings didn't practice yesterday. This is, you hate to kill Shanahan because the injuries have been mounting like crazy.
Yep, no question. I mean, they're not the same team, but this happens to teams that go through the Super Bowl loss. I mean, it's not quite Pat Riley's disease of me, but there is a little bit element of that. Look, I don't think people realize when you go to the Super Bowl how hard it is on you when you lose the Super Bowl. It's really challenging, because you want to celebrate the season, but you're so disappointed. And again, it more of that reflects the offseason. And you end up seeming like you have all these injuries that you're not sure you were going to get. Look, I think they can run the ball in this game, but McCaffrey's not healthy, and they redid his contract this offseason. You would have thought they would have known about that, right? So they obviously didn't. He was healthy when they did the deal. They need him back. They're slow on offense now, Patrick, and they used to never be slow. But when you want to play a fullback and a running back, you got to be really good at tight end. You got to be good at receiver. You got to be fast out of base personnel. They're just not fast out of base personnel. So now they lose that advantage that they have. And Purdy's got to play better. I thought he was bad last week. He's got to play better. He knows it. They just, to me, now Dallas, I think it's a tough spot for them against Dallas because Dallas knows they got to play better. I mean, Dallas is a team that you mentioned it earlier that when they're able to play from in front, they're really good. But if they can't play from in front, then all of a sudden they take a giant step backwards.
Let's talk about a game in division. This is a good one with the Colts sitting 4-3 at the Texans 5-2. We should give a quick shout out to our buddy Mark Perez, our old producer, because he is pissed. Every time I say the Texans seem fraudulent, he gets bitter. He's a huge Texans fan. I digress. This number is being bet towards the Colts. Open 6.5. It's down to 4.5 at a couple of shops. What do you got here on Colts Texans?
I don't know how you can bet the Colts here. Among players that have had 150 passes per attempts in his first two seasons, here are the lowest completion percentages over the last decade. And Bryce Petty's 53.1, Deshaun Kaiser's 53.2, Anthony Richardson's at 53.5. I mean, this guy is mad. It drives you crazy. He drives you crazy because he's so inconsistent that I don't know how you could bet on him. I don't know how you could say, boy, we really got something here. I don't know how you do that. I think it's really hard. And it's hard to predict. I do think C.J. Stroud didn't play well last week. I don't think he played well. And he really misses Nico Collins. I think that's part of the thing. But, this is a game where it came down. It was a great game, an opening day game, that both teams played well in the game. Richardson was really good, but he's so off target. I mean, he's at 29.7% off target on every throw. I mean, you just can't live like that. You can't live like that and survive. I don't know how you bet that one. I mean, and then we didn't talk about this. How does Gussie play defense again? If Mixon's healthy, how are they going to stop the run? They could stop the run against Miami last week. And you could line up in short yardage offense with Miami. They weren't going to run the ball. I mean, short yardage defense. Where was Miami going to go?
That's the battle of the producers. Bauman with his Colts and Perez with his Texans. Good luck to the both of you. The Jets, we talked about them on Monday. This is a bad football team. And now Rodgers has 3 legit injuries. He's going to play. The Jets are 2-5. They're at the Patriots. The Patriots are 1-6. They get worse every single week. The Jets are laying 7 on the road here.
I mean, that's amazing, right? I mean, but the one game that they dominated, the one game that the Jets played well was against the Patriots. Patriots 11 first downs, right? And so the thing that worries you about the Jets is their field goal kicker is terrible. Zerline's missed 4 kicks out of 40 yards. In today's world, you can't do that and survive. You got to have a really good kicker. But, the last time they played, Brissett was the quarterback. They had 11 first downs. They couldn't run the ball on the Jet front. They were able to dominate. They only had 139 yards in the game the last time they played the Jets. It was really a one-sided game. I'm not sure that, the Jets are look, they're going to try to get the ball, but they move so slow. They don't really have any explosiveness. And even though they signed Devontae Adams, he's not explosive anyway.
Eagles-Bengals. So both teams got right. Eagles at the Giants, the Bengals with Cleveland. The Eagles are 4-2. The Bengals are 3-4. This number's 2.5. The Bengals are laying 2.5 hosting the Eagles.
Shocking. But when you break this game down, the Eagles, when they play a good offense, they struggle. They play the Browns. They played the Packers. They couldn't. They played the Falcons, who could throw the football. The Bucs threw for 334 against them. I mean, when they play the Browns and the Giants, they look better. They can't cover. I mean, now look, since he's got offensive line issues, right? So Orlando Brown, their backups are hurt. I don't know. Orlando Brown's going to try to go, but they're going to have a hard time blocking Philly. But here's what I would say. Philly can't make a play on the ball. I mean, that tells you everything you need to know. Guess how many turnovers Philly has created with their defense this year?
How many?
2.
Wow. 2. No takeaways.
They can't make a play on they can't take away because they can't cover. They're not good enough in the back end. Now, since he can't play run defense, will Philly understand that they need to run the ball? I mean, that's the problem with Philly. Philly, it's run the ball, play action. Look, I think give Dan Campbell credit. When they threw it 55 times against the Bucs and lost, Goff hasn't thrown it more than 25 times ever since then, right? Like, he said, fuck it. This is our identity. This is what we're going to do. It's the same thing the Eagles got to do. They got to run the ball. They can't get into this crazy, let's get it. They got great receivers on the outside. They can make plays down the field. But this is going to be a 30 and under pass, and they control the game with their run game.
Let's get to our DraftKings bet highlights. And this one, I like this one. This one's a little off the board. The Packers are going down to Jacksonville. And the Packers right now, Michael, are laying anywhere between, let's make sure I get the number correct here. It looks like 3.5 on the road at Jacksonville. And you like this spot for the Jags.
Yeah, I mean, look, the Packers have been, last week they've only allowed 31 first downs in the last 2 games, but where I think this could be a little bit troublesome for the Packers is their look ahead. They got the Lions at home next week. When you look at the Packers, they struggled on the road against the Rams when they went out there. They won the game, but they struggled. It was close. And, they've only lost 2 games this year, but they lost by 2 points to Philadelphia, and they lost by 5. They lost 2 points to Minnesota and 5 to Philadelphia. So, I think to me, one of the things about Philadelphia, the Green Bay that's fascinating is they have allowed 70 of the points allowed have come in the second quarter. Think about this. They've allowed 70 points in the second quarter. They've only allowed 73 in the other 3 quarters. So for some reason, they get it. But this is the first time where they won a game where they didn't turn the ball over. That was impressive. I love their skill, but I don't think Jordan Love's playing at the highest level. And, I think Bixby can run the ball on Green Bay. The heat, humidity will start being a factor here. And look, let's face it. I think if Jacksonville doesn't win this game, this season's over. They might as well pack. I mean, I think it's over now, Patrick, but the season could be over.
You can find a 4.5 in the market with the Jags. Take it. That's the DraftKings bet highlight presented by DraftKings. DraftKings, the crown is yours. There's one more before we get out of here on the GM Shuffle I have to ask you about, a great one. The Bills are laying 3, blanketed across the board. They're laying 3 at Seattle.
Hasn't moved an inch, right? Has not moved an inch all week. Look, I say this about Seattle. Seattle's skill players are really good. Kenneth Walker, the receivers. We're not sure about Metcalf's health, right? I think that's a concern. I think you have to take that in. Where is he going to go? Is he going to play? Because I think he gives them a whole dimension that you have to look at. But to me, I think, he's got a sprained MCL, so he's week to week. So I'm not sure about that. I don't know how Seattle, this number hasn't itched up to 3.5. I know that they have the home field, all that, but it hasn't been that good. But you could throw the ball on Seattle. Seattle's finally healthy on defense, though. They've got some of their defensive tackles back. I thought they played better defense last week, and I think they're starting to come around. But the offensive line's got to play better for Seattle. Can Buffalo put pressure? But one thing I do know why I think this line hasn't moved is I think because Seattle can run the football on Buffalo. Buffalo's a nickel defense. They're going to push them around. They're going to want to have the ball 40 minutes in the game. I think if Buffalo has to play a lot of defense in the game, it's a problem for them.
Would you lay it to kick off Week 8 tonight with the Vikings 2.5, or would you take the 3 with the Rams?
I think I would lay the 2.5. I think the Vikings are the better team, and I think if you could stop Sean from running the ball, it gives you an advantage. It really does.
Yeah, I'm laying the 2.5. I believe in O'Connell. Turnaround after losing to Detroit. I think this is a big test for the team. I think they'll be ready. Rumors with the Rams. Let's lay the 2.5. Michael, enjoy the football and enjoy your day.
Thank you, Patrick. You too. Thank you so much.
Great job. You can check him on McAfee, and all the shows. Elliot, great job producing. I'm Patrick Meagher. We'll see you next time on the GM Shuffle.